On the special episode of Survive and Thrive 8791, guest host Will Decorah takes the mic in the Buck and Honey's remote studios to interview his dad, Coach Tim Decorah. Tim shares powerful stories from growing up in Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin, navigating family challenges, anxiety, and loss before ultimately finding triumph on the basketball court with a state championship senior season. It's a heartfelt conversation about resilience, family, and overcoming adversity. This will be a good one. Here we go.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. What is up? Wherever you are or whatever you are doing, I hope you're having a great day. For our loyal listeners, you may notice an unfamiliar voice. And for our new listeners, you are in for a special one. I'm your host, Will Decorah, stepping in for Coach Decorah as special guest. We are in the Buck and Honey's remote studios on our east side of our great capital city of Madison, Wisconsin. You can listen to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and YouTube at Survive and Thrive 8791. You can follow the podcast and get access to previous episodes on Facebook at Survive and Thrive 8791, the podcast. Please don't forget to hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you listen to the show. And leave us a comment if you liked what you heard. If there's a topic or you know a guest who would love to share their story, email Tim at tdecorah@gmail.com. That's TDECORAH@gmail.com. Glad you could join us. Our mission is to share stories and conversations that make you cry, laugh, and think, stimulating emotions, creating laughter, and inspiring the mind. A new episode will air on Monday and Thursday morning, featuring a wide range of guests. The podcast will touch on many subjects such as, but not limited to, grief, loss of a loved one, recovery, professional setback, mental illness, success despite challenges, etc. Our guests will share how they learn to survive and thrive. Before I introduce our special guest, I'd like to highlight our website, surviveandthrive8791.com. You can see what we are doing at Survive and Thrive 8791 and the events we are hosting. If you're a business or an advocate for mental health and recovery, we invite you to partner with us through sponsorship opportunities. Please contact us at surviveandthrive8791@gmail.com. This is our guest and episode intro. According to the internet, and the internet is always right, correct, Dad?
Absolutely, unequivocally, always. Correct, but subject to change.
Subject to change. I like that answer. Well, I don't need the internet because I have my wife, Samantha, and she's always right.
Darn right.
According to an AI artificial intelligence overview, approximately 14.3% of adult men in the U.S. suffer from an anxiety disorder in any given year. According to data from the National Institute of Mental Health, this equates to tens of millions, as over 30% of all U.S. adults experience an anxiety disorder during their lifetime. Today's guest has not only lived with crippling anxiety, he has overcome and wants to help others. Today, I welcome Coach Tim Decorah, who I commonly refer to as Dad, to the Buck and Honey's remote studios. This is part one of a multi-part series in which we dive into parts of my dad's story that even I don't know about, nor has he touched on in the podcast. My dad grew up in the tourist trap of the Midwest, Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin, and graduated from Wisconsin Dells High School and is a proud chief. After high school, my dad would take his talents to the University of Wisconsin-Platteville, where he would earn a physical education and health degree and was a member of the 1991 Division III national champion men's basketball team. Upon graduation, he would start a teaching and coaching career that would span over 3 decades before retiring in 2024. Today, I'm so glad you could join us, Coach Tim Decorah, aka Dad. What is up?
What is up?
How did I do?
I think you did great. It's going to be interesting today to sit in the other chair, even though I'm in my usual chair. Those of you that are watching on YouTube or Spotify, I'm in my normal chair, but I'm in more of the catcher mode today, and you're doing the pitching. So I'm actually good. I've told some people that we were doing this, and they thought it was so cool that you were going to ask the questions and find out a little bit more about your dad. And as we talked before we hit record, we found that there was a lot more of the onion to peel back. And so we decided to do, just instead of one episode, we're actually going to do multi things because, like Shrek and the Onion, there's a lot of layers to me. So this is really cool.
Yeah. Thank you for agreeing to do this. I think we had this idea a couple months ago and it's finally come to fruition. I think there's a lot of details and parts about your life that are super important to share and extremely interesting. I've always thought you were a great storyteller, and I thought that this would be a great opportunity to share with your listeners your story.
As well as you.
As well as me. And share your story and how you came to be where you are today. One of my favorite quotes, all things good and bad have led you to this moment. So we want to hear it all.
Absolutely. But you know what? I really want to talk, other than, right now I want to talk about my story, but we're shooting at 1:05 p.m. the day after my birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to me. But I also want to talk about the Olympics and what happened this morning.
Amazing hockey game.
Amazing hockey game. The U.S. wins the gold medal for the first time since 1980, the Miracle on Ice, which I happened to be alive for when that happened. However, back in 1980, we would see it on tape delay or we would hear about it on the news first and then they would play it. Yeah, way back in 1980, my great uncle, Grandpa Ruben, and I were going to go and watch the girls' high school team play in the Dells. He said, we'll leave after the sports, and boom, on it came that we have an upset in men's Olympic hockey, and the U.S. with a team compiled of essentially college kids beat some professionals from the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, the USSR, Russia, 4-3, and thus became the Miracle on Ice. We got the goal back for the first time since then.
A great story. And I just learned this morning that Samantha has never seen Miracle, to which my jaw dropped to the floor. So that's going to be on our to-do list this week. But a lot of cool ties to Wisconsin in the Miracle on Ice and just the U.S. hockey history in general.
Mark Johnson, who is the women's hockey coach at the University of Wisconsin, was a member of that team. And I believe he scored one of those 4 goals in 1980. And then Ryan, I believe it was not Ryan Suter, but one of the Suter boys, Bobby Suter, who's got a rink named after him on the west side of Madison, was also a member of that team. So a lot of Wisconsin ties, very much so like our women's gold medal winning hockey team, tons of Badgers. And what was so cool, and I don't know if you saw this, is whenever they would pan to the people watching back at home or somewhere in the crowd, I saw a lot of motion W's, which was pretty cool.
Very cool. We're a hockey country going forward.
We are a hockey state as well.
That's right. Before we get started, I got to thank our sponsor, Buck and Honey's Restaurants, are a place that people can escape to. For me, it's a great place to escape to from cooking dinner. I enjoy cooking dinner, but it is always nice to get a break from that. Do you cook, Dad?
I do cook. And my genre, style, or cuisine is all over the map. I am a big foodie, as you know, and the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree. But what I used to do, I don't do it as much anymore, is I would watch a ton of Food Network shows and watch what was being made. And then I'm like, okay, go to the internet and what did they make? And I would make a lot of things that were on the Food Network. Not quite as good, or it didn't look as good, but it tasted pretty darn good.
Lots of Emeril Lagasse and Bobby Flay in our house growing up.
Absolutely.
With their great food and drink menu, 5-star customer service, and a welcoming and vibrant atmosphere, people keep coming back. With locations in Sun Prairie, Monona, Waunakee, and now Mount Horeb, most communities in Dane County, which encompass the Madison metropolitan area, can get to a Buck and Honey's within 10 to 15 minutes. Drum roll. Have you ever been to a Buck and Honey's?
I have, but let's talk about this acoustically sound plastic table. I can't wait for Menards, if they're listening, to jump on board and name and sponsor our mental health desk, but we're going to just patiently wait here for that to happen. But anyway, I have been fortunate to have been to all 4 locations. And of course, my favorite happens to be the home office in Sun Prairie. That's where it all started. And then my second favorite is kind of a tie between Wanakee and Monona, because we used to live in Wanakee. Now we live a little bit closer to Monona. And then I've been to Mount Horeb a couple of times. But favorite food, pizza. I love Bomber's Special Pizza. It's been some of the stuff I've been eating since about the summer of 1985. So it's good stuff. Pizza.
Good. And check out the scallop and raspberry vinaigrette salad. Sometimes it kind of goes on and off the menu, but when it shows up, elite.
Elite.
Very good.
I will try that next time.
On the podcast, our guests follow the format for sharing their story like this. Well, in segment 1, we talk about what it was like, my dad's childhood through high school, what happened to get Dad on the podcast, which is living in recovery from his anxiety disorder. And in segment 2, we continue to talk about what happened, get into what life is like now, and we discuss Dad's 5 suggestions for thriving. You grew up in Wisconsin Dells and graduated from Wisconsin Dells High School, and you're a proud chief. Tell us about what life was like growing up in the Dells, earliest memories.
Earliest memories, I always share this when I was teaching, that my first 3 years on planet Earth, our neighbors were the Watermans, Jack and Mary Waterman. And young Johnny, he was a year older. He was the same age as your mom. And then Jen came a little bit after, but they were our neighbors. And the Watermans, ironically, with the cool and sweet last name, became owners, creators, developers, whatever, of Noah's Ark. And that was so cool to have them living next door. But when we started out, Jack was a guy who farmed out pinball machines and jukeboxes. And oftentimes he would store some of those pinball machines on our front porch. And my grandpa Reuben often called him, not Jack, but he called him Jukebox, and had a nickname for everybody. But that's pretty cool growing up there. And we were downtown Dells, right next to the park is where I would kind of grow up those first couple of years. Ironically, spin that forward to when I turned 15 through 18 years, I ended up moving in with my Uncle Sam and Aunt Rose about a block down the road. So kind of how full circle that came about. But I grew up there, and then about 3 or 4 years old, we ended up moving out to a place called Indian Heights. It was about 5 or 6 miles out of town. They had, and I say they, the Ho-Chunk Nation had built some houses in I'm not going to say cul-de-sac, but it was a round circular area, and there was about 20 houses out there, and we moved into one of the smaller houses. That was my mom, my Uncle Sam, my great uncle or Grandpa Reuben, and my great grandmother Ellen, all lived in this same little house. And wasn't quite elbows and butts, but it was a little bit tight. Grew up there until I was, I want to say 8 or 9, and then we moved out to, there's a ski hill in the Dells called Christmas Mountain. We moved out there, and I lived out there from 3rd grade to, again, my sophomore year. And then kind of in the middle of my sophomore year, my ride passed away. And my ride was my other grandpa, Emerson, would take the bus from home in the morning, and then after practice was done, either football or basketball practice, I'd get on the phone and I'd call up Grandpa Emerson and say, "Hey, I'm done." "Okay, yep." Boom, click, and him and I kind of had this little language that only we understood, and he knew that it was time to come and get me. And he would come in and grab me and then take me home, and usually fed me on the way and drop me off, and rinse and repeat over and over until, that sophomore year when he ended up getting cancer. And from the time he got diagnosed, somewhere in the end of October, he would pass away in December, mid-December of that same year, so 2 months later. And when he passed away, all I could think about, and I don't even really think I grieved, but I really was thinking, how am I going to get back and forth? How am I going to get home? Because we rarely had a phone, and we rarely had a car, and I was just thinking, how am I going to get home? And so I ended up having a conversation with my aunt and uncle who lived in town, Uncle Sam and Aunt Rose. And all throughout my life, until probably about a year or two ago, I thought, my mom and my Uncle Sam had gotten together and they had talked and concocted a scheme that Tim was going to come and live with them until they could get a car. And as it turns out, that conversation never happened. The conversation that did happen, though, was me and my Uncle Sam and Aunt Rose, and I asked them, can I come live with you for a couple of weeks so that I could, instead of trying to figure out a ride situation, I could walk back and forth from their house to school. And what ended up happening was that 2 weeks ended up turning into 2 years, and I lived with them and could walk to school and walk home from practices, and life was all good. But the only thing I had to do was I had to leave the care of my mom, and I also had to leave my younger brother behind. And that probably wasn't the greatest upbringing for him, because he had to see a lot of things that little kids probably shouldn't see. And that was his mom and dad suffer through some of the things that they had to suffer through, which was their alcoholism. That's kind of how, in a nutshell, how things came about.
So lots of extended family. I know that they have been heavily involved in your life, but let's backtrack a little and just talk a little bit about your mom and dad and what you can remember early on from them, and what life was like as a kid, being around very young parents.
Well, this idea popped into my head when I got mentally well and got some sobriety underneath my belt in March of 2022. I finally realized that I had to accept the way I had grown up, and that was living in an alcoholic household. And I also had to realize, after looking at my own mental health, that my mom had suffered from anxiety, depression, PTSD, trauma, and all along that, while my mom was alive, that she was living probably with some mental illness, very much like I did. And that to get through some of that mental illness, she also had to use alcohol to cope with that, which is essentially what I did for a lot of my life. Except the one thing that I was able to do is I was able to reach out and ask for help. And consequently, I'm still alive today. But some of my earliest memories were of my mom and I, and it was just her and I for the first 7 years. And she was a great mom. She gave me the love of the Beatles. I think she loved sports and athletics back then, up until 1976. I forget what it was, Title IX, that there were no sports. But from what I heard from friends of hers, people that I talked to and did a little research, and my mom said that she was a very good athlete, really good at badminton, really good at bowling, really good at volleyball. Some of those early memories are of her and I riding around in her Mustang and us jamming out to the Beatles. But there were often times, which I think started some of my anxiety, is that when I was 2, 3, and 4 years old, she was 18 when I was born. Being 21 and 22 years old, she was living the life of a 22 and 23-year-old. And I don't know what you were doing at that age, but I was going to college. You were going to college, and we weren't necessarily taking care of a kid, but she was. And at times she was also being a kid herself and doing some of the stuff that kids do, going out for movies, hanging out with friends. And oftentimes I was left at home with my great grandmother, which was awesome. Was a great human being. And the only problem is, in her later years, when she was taking care of me, she also was living with Parkinson's. And I had to witness some things that probably 2, 3, and 4-year-olds shouldn't witness, is that my great grandmother had balance issues with her Parkinson's. And of course, Parkinson's, we know that from seeing Muhammad Ali and Michael J. Fox, there's that trembling and that shaking. She also had that as well, but she had balance issues, coordination issues, and I would see her fall a lot. And I don't remember what that was like. Doing my research, I found out from my aunt and uncles that they saw that too, and they couldn't imagine me having to go through that all the time. And then the guy that probably made the most impact to who I am today was my great uncle, but he lived in our house. We lived in his house. He was more of a grandpa to me at times. He was a buddy at times. He was a best friend at times. And then he also played a very large role as a father figure. My work ethic came from him, and my love of the Milwaukee Bucks, sports, basketball. He wasn't much of a football guy. That came from my other uncles, but he really gave me passion and love for all of those games, including auto racing and pool. And so some of those were some of my favorite memories of really the three people that really were there in the beginning.
And that was your Uncle Reuben.
That was my great uncle or Grandpa Reuben, correct.
So you talked about being raised with your mom pretty much only until you were 7. Was it at that point that you got to know your dad? You found out who your dad was? What was that process like?
So growing up, I always knew who my dad was. I knew him from him being around, dropping off Christmas presents. My mom and I would go out and go to movies, and he would be there with. He was living with his mom as well in their home, which was probably, I'm going to say, 3-4 miles from our house. They lived on the other side of the interstate, so having to cross the interstate was a little bit tough, so they'd get there a little further away. But I knew who he was growing up for those two reasons. The first reason being he's my dad, and we would see him often enough for me to know who he was. But then the other reason I knew that he was my dad was I got bullied a lot when I was a kid. And oftentimes some of the kids in the neighborhood would call me Little Wayne. I was the first original Little Wayne. And as humorous as that might sound, to me, when I hear that, it gives me an uneasy feeling because I was bullied and picked on because I was Wayne Decorah's son. And I didn't realize it at the time that was occurring. I only realized that probably 4 or 5 years ago, that probably that had a little bit of added to the disjointed relationship that I had with my dad. And when I say disjointed, he came into my life, moved in when I was 8 years old. My younger brother, Troy, was born in 1977, and he moved in with us. And, props to him that maybe he wasn't around when I was growing up, but he decided to at least try to get it right with his second child, my brother, Troy, that he moved in. But unbeknownst to me, and I wouldn't know this until later on, he moved in, and he also moved in with his alcoholism. And my mom being there and they got married in May of 1978, I believe. They had this relationship of they kind of both fed off each other, and who was the alcoholic, who was the worst. They were both enabling each other, and oftentimes I had to be, a third parent to my brother, Troy, growing up, changing diapers, warming up bottles, getting his clothes ready for school, making sure he got on the bus, and didn't realize it, but that's something that a 9, 10, or 11-year-old kid shouldn't be doing. And I was doing those things relatively well, I might say.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned your mom was 18 when you were born. How old was your dad at that time? My
mom was a young graduate, so she graduated in 1968. And if some people are going to fact check me, gotta honestly not 100% sure, but my dad was old for his age. So he was a 1970 grad, so he was 2 years younger in school-wise, I believe, but really about a year and a half younger than my mom. So she graduated in 68. 9 months later, I came around, so I was the graduation present for my mom. And my dad would have been, when I was born, a junior in high school. And he would still have had a couple of years left in high school.
And you talked about your brother, Troy. Memories of him, I mean, you were old enough to probably remember that time a little bit when he was born, but just talk a little bit about him and what you remember those early years being like, and maybe dive a little bit deeper into what it was like running the household almost, if you will, or at least being a parental figure to him.
Yeah, I mean, he came in and it's like you know what it's like having a baby. It just, you like to hold them. They got that same baby smell and they cry and they can't talk yet. So they cry when they're hungry. They cry when their diaper needs to be changed. And having a baby brother was really cool, going to school and telling all my friends that, yeah, my mom, I got a baby brother now. And that was really cool. But what I look back on it now, what wasn't really cool was me having to be that third parent. And there would be times where I wouldn't be able to do some things because I had to stay home and take care of him and babysit him and make sure he was fed and make sure he was changed and bathe him and put clothes on and put his pajamas on. And that occurred through, until I moved out in the winter of 1984. Those 7 years that I was with him, I was reading him books. I was, when it came time to go to school, I was making sure he got on the bus. I would feed him. Oftentimes I would make him his breakfast. I'd make sure he got on the bus after school. And I always had to have my radar on as to where and what he was doing and if he was okay. And thinking about those things, that was a huge burden for me to have to be doing at that particular age, but it just was something that I felt I was supposed to do and kind of took some pride in just taking care of him. And, he grew up in my shadow, if I can say that. And I think life was really tough for him, especially when he got to start to understand who I was. I was just his older brother, his big brother. But then as time went on, I think it caused a little bit of rift in our relationship in that as we got older, he would say, do you know how hard it was to be your brother? And I had no idea. The comparisons that he had to go through when he was in second, third, and fourth grade, are you going to be like your brother? And he would say, there's no way I can be like you. And I didn't have the same things. But those were some of the things that he kind of struggled with throughout the early part of his life. And then in the end of his life, when he was old enough and we could start talking in regular phone conversations, I actually loved when we would talk, and we would talk about the old days and we would talk about what he was doing. And, unfortunately, he passed away in 2005. And I kind of missed that, being able to have that conversation of, two brothers now that are adults, and he's got a couple of kids that are still alive that I don't have any communication with because he passed away. And when he passed away, that bond or that relationship, or what relationship should have occurred, was severed because of his death. But yeah, there's not a day, I shouldn't say there's not a week or a month that doesn't go by where there's something that reminds me of him and our conversations that we've had.
Mm-hmm. I mean, raising him, where were your parents during that time? And what, two-part question, also, what drove you to take on that role? Did they ask you, did somebody ask you, or did somebody task you saying, hey, you have to look after Troy and take care of him, be sure he's fed, be sure he gets to school, be sure he, changes the socks at the beginning of each day type thing? Or was it just an innate knowledge that you needed to take on this caregiver role?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first part, unfortunately, when you have two alcoholic parents that are living the life of younger parents, still pretty young at that particular point.
Dad, 27, mom, 25.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, mom, 27. My mom was 27 and my dad was 25. And that's still pretty young to have kids, and they're having a second kid, but they're still living that life of young parents in their 20s. And what was that like? That was trying to find a job, My mom oftentimes had the job. My dad was going from job to job to job, couldn't probably hold jobs, and them also doing the fun things that you do at that age. Play softball, play in a softball league, play in a pool league, play men's city league basketball, and party with friends and whatnot on weekends. Well, those weekend parties turned into weekday parties. My mom loved, like I mentioned, my mom loved bowling. She was in a bowling league, and well, my dad's there too as well, so he might as well be on the bowling team. And that often left me at home with my brother Troy. And it was just this is what older brothers do for younger brothers or younger siblings. It comes with the territory. What doesn't come with the territory at times is on the weekdays or on the weekend, especially the weekends, if there was some day drinking going on or trying to get through some of the anxiety that my mom had or maybe my dad had, they would be drinking during the day and oftentimes have enough that they would be passed out. And who would then be in care of my younger brother? That would fall on me. And prior to that, I was just doing the normal stuff a 6, 7, and 8-year-old would do. Is I'd see that and I would get out of the house. Well, I really couldn't do that with either one or both parents passed out or one gone and the other one passed out. And here's a 1 to 2-year-old boy there. He's got to be taken care of. So I just had to assume that role and take that on. And I look back on that, and that's something that an 8-year-old or 9-year-old child shouldn't have to do. But it was something that I just did it just because I knew I had to.
So really great summation of your family and the history of your early years. How do you feel like those years and that experience with both your mom and your dad and your brother affected you in your life today, both positively and negatively? Like, I guess, how did that whole story turn you into, what person did it turn you into today? In 2020, end of 2021 and 2022, when I got some professional help to look at what happened at an early age that turned me into what I would become, and then eventually when I got into recovery, I think I learned that it angered me growing up the way I did, and how my parents and their role as parents, it made me angry for a long, long time. And then I got some professional help, and I reframed it maybe to make me feel better, or I reframed it to actually tell the truth, in that I think it made me, I'm alive today because of the work that my mom did. She really, truly tried to be a great parent and a mom, but she was handcuffed with, she was a righty, great bowler, but she was handcuffed with her right hand tied behind her back and had to go through life with her eyes closed as well, and trying to be a high school student and trying to go to college, and then trying to be a young mom and taking care of a family, and essentially taking care of her husband through most of her life. And she got to take care of herself. And in that case, life was tough for everybody involved. But when I reframed it, I said she was actually a great mom because she did what she did she did the best she could with what she had, which wasn't much. So I'm alive today because of those things. And in the long run, what ended up happening, me taking care of my brother, prepped me for, I essentially was a younger parent at 22 when your older sister was born. And I felt at home when each of you kids was born. I felt at home that I know how to do this. I know how to change a diaper. I know what a cry is all about. I know what, and it felt normal. So I really enjoyed
I enjoyed that time when I was taking care of my brother, albeit a little bit angry, but I enjoyed that time. And it also made me enjoy the time that when you guys were at that age, taking care of you made me feel really good. So was it all bad, and were some things that I saw that shouldn't be seen by a young child? Absolutely. But like you had mentioned, I think it started my anxiety headed in the wrong direction, albeit slowly occurring. And then certainly by the end in 2021, it was unmanageable and it was crippling, and I didn't know how to manage it, and I didn't have any coping skills other than what I learned from my parents, and that was alcohol works.
So in late 2021, you'd be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. And because our listeners want to hear the rest of your story and what brought you to the podcast, I need to talk about our sponsor one more time. Buck and Honey's has been with Survive and Thrive 8791 crew since the beginning. With 4 locations in the Madison area, one is always near. People ask, why Buck and Honey's? Owner Tom Anderson places a high priority on the mental health of his employees. He has a mental health professional available for them should they need support. I don't know how many businesses go above and beyond their EAP, Employee Assistance Program, but Buck and Honey's does. Coach Tim Decorah, aka my dad, is in the Buck and Honey's remote studios today to talk about his lifelong battle with an anxiety disorder. He would suffer with an alcohol use disorder that would nearly take his life. He wants to help others by sharing his story so that those who suffer can get the help they need. You'll hear about what life is like and the work he is doing now. Please stay tuned. Don't change the channel. You're not going to want to miss segment 2 of Survive and Thrive 8791. We'll be right back.
If you, a loved one, or someone you know is experiencing a physical, mental, or emotional crisis, there is help and resources out there. Contact NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness Helpline, at 1-800-950-6264. This is a free service providing information, resource referrals, and support to people living with a mental illness, their family, providers, and the public. United Way 211 is available 24/7, 365, and offers free confidential assistance. They connect people with the local programs and services that can help. Dial 211. Emergency Crisis Services, dial 911. The Suicide Prevention Lifeline, dial 988. To connect via web, chat, visit suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Along with those numbers, there is help. You just need to say 3 words. I need help. Now, back to the show.
We are back. Welcome back to segment 2 of Survive and Thrive 8791. I'm your guest host, Will Decorah. We're in the Buck and Honey's remote studios on the east side of our great capital city of Madison, Wisconsin. The podcast is where we feature guests who share their story in hopes of helping others who may be struggling with what life throws at them. Today, I'm glad to be joined in the Buck and Honey's remote studios by Coach Tim Decorah, aka my dad. He's here to talk today about how he was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, struggled with an alcohol use disorder, and is now helping others with his keynote presentations and podcast. Today, we are talking about how these things all started, and we're fast forwarding to how he got well in 2021. There is far too much of my dad's story to fit into a single episode. In future episodes, we'll explore his college years, becoming a young parent, and the start of his teaching and coaching career, as well as our move to Waunakee. We'll also talk about the personal and professional struggles he faced for many years, including his decision to seek help in 2014 for alcohol use disorder, and later in 2021 to address his anxiety and alcohol use disorder once and for all. A turning point that allowed him to finally get sober and begin living mentally well. He's here to share his story openly and honestly in hopes of reducing the stigma surrounding mental health and substance abuse disorders. Segment 2. So in segment 1, we talked about some pretty deep stuff, which I think is very important to understand the foundation really of your life and how formative those early years were. But you mentioned moving in with Sam and Rose when you were 15, what you thought was going to be a short stint turning into a 2-year stint of living with them. Talk a little bit about what that transition was like, how life was different and the beginning of your high school years, which from everything you've told me were some pretty good years in your life.
I've had these thoughts kind of come through my head now in the last couple of weeks because my Aunt Rose's health has kind of taken a turn for the worst, but then she's kind of bounced back and she's going back and forth a little bit. But I had this conversation with her and I'm holding her hand and I said, there's a lot of people that I have to thank for some of the things that have happened in my life, especially the high school stuff and some of the success that happened, probably more athletically than academically, but some of that success that occurred obviously goes to my coaches and teammates and teachers, but really it goes back to two people that if they didn't do what they did, I don't know what would have happened. But my Aunt Rose and my Uncle Sam took me in, and what they thought and what I thought was going to be for 2 weeks ended up being for 2 years. And I'm not sure how life would have turned out for me had they not taken me in, but they did. And for the first time, I could live without a chaotic lifestyle. I know at home living with my mom and dad and younger brother, I oftentimes didn't know what was around the next corner, what was going to happen the next day or that night. But having lived life like that, I kind of could anticipate a little bit, but there was a lot of curveballs in there. So I moved in with Uncle Sam and Aunt Rose, my cousin Matt, and all of a sudden now there was some normalcy, some routine. Have dinner at the same time, watch TV, and go to bed at a certain time, get up and do it all over again and walk to school and not have to worry about riding the bus. And I could get to school on time, and it felt really cool to live in town as well. I wasn't living in the country like I had been. And I think then for the first time in my life at 15, well, almost 15, I could grow up and live like a normal kid. I didn't have to care for a younger brother. I didn't have to essentially at times care for my mom or wonder if she was going to be okay or where she was. I had to worry about those things, but I didn't have to see them right there in front of me. And so there was less chaos. There was less chaos moving into town, and I could lead somewhat of a normal life as a student athlete and living under their roof.
That's very good. It had to have been such a stark difference from obviously what you came from to going into there. Was that structure hard for you to make that transition, or was it more so, thank God I'm out of that previous situation?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think at least for me, my experience, and then as a teacher working with kids who come from tougher backgrounds, all kids want is a roof over their head, a bed to sleep in, food to eat, and things to be, quote, normal. And that is 3 square meals a day, and parents or somebody, adults in the house, talking with them, sharing what was going on in life, and just doing, normal stuff. And that wasn't for a long time for me. My first 15 years, my life wasn't normal. And living with my uncle, I had some rules to follow. I never had rules, but I also didn't get into much trouble. But I had all of those things in place, and it was easy for me to fit in because it was kind of like school. I mean, I like going to school, and there's a certain time you eat, and certain places you have to be, certain ways you have to act. And I didn't have a lot of structure living at home with my mom and dad and younger brother, but I moved in with my uncle, and I had a lot more structure. And now I could finally just relax for the first time and not have to be on. But the flip side of that is I had to leave my younger brother back in that situation, and I thought of him, probably wasn't daily, but I thought about him a lot. And then fast forward into when he's a young adult and he's having to tell me some of the things that he had to witness. I had a hard time even comprehending that, knowing it was going on.
It's extremely difficult. I mean, 14, 15, what an awful time for kids. And you're kind of figuring out who you are. You're becoming an adult, really not a kid anymore. So to go through that transition, I'm sure it was really challenging, and maybe out of sight, out of mind helped a little bit in that transition for you. But starting high school, what was freshman, sophomore year like? Maybe you were starting high school right around that time, right?
Yeah, high school was, again, unknown for me. I don't know. You don't know what you don't know. As a parent, and having you and your sister and your brother go to school, and we're on, we have thumbs on when you need to be there. We have thumbs on what's going to happen when you walk into the building, how registration is going to be, if you want to sign up for band, if you want to, when there's equipment get handed out. I didn't know any of that stuff. I imagine all of those letters and pamphlets and things and envelopes full of information came to our house, but I was never privy to any of that. So on the first day of school, what I remember is having an enormous amount of anxiety because, A, you're walking into the high school building and there's grown adults there, including the teachers. I'm talking about the students, the other kids. And I'm walking in there as a young 14-year-old who's, I'm pretty confident, but at the same time, I have this anxiety of, where do I go? What do I do? And I'm sure that all came in a letter, but I walk in the building and I don't know what to do. And somebody says, hey, you got to go get your schedule. Unfortunately, I had some caring classmates or teammates. And what teacher did you get up? I have no idea. No schedule, nothing. And they point me in the right direction and I get my schedule. But where I felt what I think put me at ease a little bit is that we had started the football season a couple of weeks before school started. So I had football practice. I knew a little bit about the high school, but I didn't know anything about the schedule or the teachers. And what I think helped for me was having those football teammates and coaches there to provide some help and some direction. And I think that made things a little bit easier. Had I not been involved in athletics, I don't know if that would have been as easy. So that transition of going into the building with some anxiety was probably a little easier than I thought.
But you had to have friends, though, at that time, or was it more so making friends in high school that maybe you didn't have those people lean on? I mean, you talk about your teammates and people kind of pointing you in the right direction, but so did you have a group of friends going into high school, people that you knew well and people that continue to be friends through those years?
Well, I had two sets of friends, really. I had the friends that I grew up with, the neighborhood kids, the other Native American, the other Ho-Chunk kids that I grew up with since I was 2, 3, and 4 years old. And, we made that one move from where I first grew up, Indian Heights, to out by Christmas Mountain, different groups of kids, different groups of friends, but we stayed friends throughout that whole time. So I had my Ho-Chunk friends, and then I had the kids from in town, the football kids, essentially the white kids, and I was able to blend in with both, which was kind of unique, but that was part of my personality. Is I was a people pleaser all my life. I wanted to make friends, I wanted to be liked, and it didn't matter really who, but I just wanted to be liked, and the best way to do that was to reach out and meet new kids. But a lot of, growing up in a small town, you essentially have the same friends from kindergarten all the way up through. So I had those two groups of friends that I could kind of rely on, but I ended up relying more on the white kids because probably the Ho-Chunk kids were like me. All of those things, they had no idea what was going to happen when we walked into the building, where some of the other kids did. You go here, and then you start classes. I had no idea, and I'm going to guess some of the other Native American kids were in the same boat.
Well, you figured it out, and you managed to have quite an illustrious football and basketball career, but you played baseball, right, as well?
Well, there's another story behind that, which I gladly can share. But yeah, I ended up playing football, basketball, and baseball through my essentially junior high. And then when I went into high school, I ended up just playing football and basketball.
So tell us about your baseball story.
Yeah, it was weird. So freshman year, I we kind of talked about going in and walking into the building, but I played freshman football, and we had a very good high school program, and rarely, if at all, freshmen played on the JV or even on the varsity. Just didn't happen. So I was on the freshman football team, and I was the starting quarterback, and we did pretty well. And then freshman year basketball season started, and I got elevated to the varsity, which back in the 80s, late 70s, early to mid 80s, didn't happen. Freshmen didn't play on varsity. Freshmen maybe would play JV, but typically freshmen stayed on the freshman team. So it was very rare for freshmen to make the varsity team, and I got elevated to the varsity. I don't remember if it happened right away, but it was pretty darn close. So I got to play freshman basketball, and fortunately, I mentioned my aunt and uncle being pivotal people in the state championship that would happen in 1987. There are 3 people that would be very pivotal my freshman year, and the 3 seniors were 3 guys named Matt Wynn, W-I-N-N. I'd love to have that last name, Wynn, Wayne Nevar, and Dave Cahoon. Those guys were the 3 seniors that year, and seniors can be accepting or they can make life very rough. And Matt Wynn was the leading scorer and the best player in that particular group, and they were all pretty decent. But Matt was kind of the ringleader, and he accepted me right away. And that's just who he is. He's just a great human being, and he accepted me right away. And so then Dave and Wayne then ended up accepting me, and they realized that I would help them win. If they don't accept me and make life really hard, who knows what happens? Maybe I don't come out for basketball the next year, and I focus on football and baseball. But I enjoyed some playing time. Never got to start, but played a lot as a freshman. And then the season was over, and I ended up seeing Mr. Murphy in the hallway, and he was getting ready for baseball. And I had played baseball all the way up through 8th grade year, and I said, Mr. Murph, Coach Murphy, what do you think about me playing varsity baseball this year? Because I thought I was pretty good. And I was even more confident now because I had played varsity basketball during the winter. What do you think about me playing varsity baseball? And he said, well, we got some pretty good players. Yeah, I don't think so. I think maybe next year. And he made my decision about playing baseball for the rest of my career right on that day. I don't know if he knew it or not, but I ended up going to the weight room because my football coach, who I absolutely adored, worshipped the earth that he walked on. He said, do you want to start? This is a conversation he had before I had the conversation with the baseball coach. He said, do you want to be the starting quarterback next year as a sophomore on the varsity? And I said, yes, I do. And he said, get in the weight room. And then he gave me a big shove on the shoulder. And that's all he had to say. But I thought I'd see how the baseball thing would play out. And it played out like I thought it would. I wasn't going to play varsity. So I got in the weight room, and I didn't play high school baseball at all, which was a shame because in 1986, my junior year, our high school, the Dells Chiefs, won the state championship. So I would have been a state championship baseball player as well as a state championship basketball player. But, who knows how life works, but that's how life worked for me.
If you had to choose, if you had to rank them.
Oh boy, I've had this conversation. I actually had this thought for myself is I loved high school football. It would have been better if our high school coach, he left after my junior year, took another job on a whim and got it. And we ended up, my sophomore and my senior year, we ended up losing in the game to go to the state championship game. So had we won, we would have been playing at Camp Randall, but we lost twice. And then, of course, the last thing I remember about high school sports is the 1987 state championship, when something I have loved doing since I can ever remember was playing basketball. We ended up winning the state championship in 1987. So I think basketball's got a slight edge on football. But at the same time, I think I would have been a pretty good baseball player too. But it ended up me just playing football and basketball.
All right. So I still in here rank. Number one basketball.
Number 1A basketball.
No, we're not doing this. 1, 2, 3.
1 basketball, 2 football, 3 baseball.
Wow. I would have guessed that, I think. That's a good ranking. Well, all in all, high school, positive experience, you would say?
I would say positive experience because, as I mentioned, the success and wanting to be a people pleaser. I could please people on Friday nights for football in the fall, and I had some success as a quarterback. So going back to that first story of the football coach asking me if I wanted to be the varsity starting quarterback as a sophomore, I started from the second game on, and I was the starter for 3 straight years. And in those 3 years, I forget what the record is, but it's like 26 and 4 with 2 trips to the state semifinals. And that's the only thing that if I could go back in time and try to fix would be to get us to the state championship game would be something if I could go back in time and do that. But then the basketball thing of my freshman year getting to play, my sophomore year, we had a 7-footer that had left, came back my sophomore year, and we made it to 1 game away from state, and we lost. So the only thing we were thinking about is if we beat this team, Prairie du Chien, we're going to get to play on TV the next week for the state championship, and we lost. And if I could go back in time and get to the state championship game my sophomore year, I don't know what that would have did for my career, but I would love to go back and replay that one. And then fast forward to my senior year, we start the season. We lost the very first game of the year, and that was about a week or two after football season got over. So some people, and probably including me, were thinking, well, the Dells is, the football players still have their football pads on and their football legs, so we're going to let that one slide. We win the next 25 in a row and finish the season 25-1 and Class B state champions. And what was so cool about that was I got to do it with my best friends in high school, and then we got to do it for our fans. And I still remember this to this day, that my career ended with a missed free throw, shot number 1, and then I made the second free throw of an intentional foul. And as I'm dribbling the ball, I can look through the glass at the field house, and I can see my Uncle Sam and my Aunt Rose and my Uncle Gary and my Aunt Patty, as well as all of my best friends from high school, all of the kids that were the fans. And it was just a sea of blue behind the basket. In addition to the fans, the high school fans and the students, all of the community was there. And when I say we won it, it wasn't just our teammates and the coaches. It was we won it together with the students, the band, the community members, our families. It was a family and a community event, and there's still people to this day that talk about that team and that year. And those are people that are talking about it that weren't on the team. They were in school or they lived in the community, and it was just a really, really cool thing. And it was so cool to be a part of. And to end my high school career winning, there's back then only 3 teams that got to do that. Everybody else loses their last game. We won our last game, so it was pretty cool.
How many career points?
1,199 career points. And it's got a little asterisk now next to it, is because in 1987, that was the last year we didn't have the three-pointer. The three-pointer came in for the 1987-88 season, and since then it's been here.
So maybe 1,300,
so
1,400.
Yeah, I like to say this, but in the state championship game, we scored 62 as a team. I had 31, so I had half the points. And somebody mentioned to me after years and years, I think it might have even been my coach, Jack Capelli. He said that you would have had like 39 in the championship game because of some of your jump shots. If I had 31 of your 8 baskets, 8 of those would have been three-pointers, because they actually did have the arc down for the Badger basketball team, college team. So 8 of those baskets were taken from outside the arc, but because we didn't have the 3, they were actually only worth 2. So he said, yeah, you would have had 37, 38, or 39 points.
Only a couple away from 40, which would have been way cooler.
Only a couple away from 40, which would have been way cooler, but I would have taken the 38 or 39. Most importantly, we got the state championship.
That's right.
Who cares about the points?
And your name is still in the program.
Still etched in the program years and years. When I go to the state tournament now, used to take you and Sam and Emily to the state tournament. Now I get to take Rory, grandson Rory, and maybe granddaughter Annie, if that's okay with the parents, to the state tournament, and we grab a program. And the first thing I look for is, hey, am I still in there? And I'm still in there for a couple of things. Free throws.
Most free throws in a game, most free throws in a tournament.
Most free throws in a game, most free throws in 2 games, and most free throws, I believe, for the tournament. Yeah, so it's got lucky. And it's interesting, the circle of how life works is I remember shooting free throws back when I was a younger kid, and then probably 3rd or 4th grade, just kind of envisioning myself, okay, here's Tim Decorah, shoot. Actually, and then also back then it was Tim Thundercloud. He's got 2 free throws to win the state championship game. He makes the first to tie it, and then he makes the second to win it, and yeah, their state championship. So I was thinking about that and believing that would happen, and ironically, it did happen. I didn't make free throws to win the game, but it was kind of pretty close.
When did you become Tim Decorah?
I became Tim Decorah in my 6th grade year. It partially happened. And then when I showed up on campus for middle school, I had to go to the D line instead of the T line. And it was a very traumatic day for me. And
how was that determined?
It was determined by my parents decided one day to go in and change my name from Thundercloud to Decorah my 6th grade year in the spring. And rumor has it, or the legend was that my mom was very angry at my grandpa and great uncle that she was just going to do it, and she went in and did it, and against what the family thought.
Wow.
The family said that he should stay at Thundercloud because that's who raised him. And then it occurred that I came back. It was a 6th grade one day, and the teacher said, Mrs. Teese said, hey, congratulations. Did your mom and dad get married? I see your last name is Tim Decorah now, and you have a white sweatshirt on. She does remember her saying it, but she doesn't remember how it all worked out because I asked her a couple of years ago, and she said your face was turned white, and then I knew that there was something wrong and that you didn't know, and I didn't know. So she must have went to the office. She doesn't remember, but she must have went to the office, she thought, and said, he doesn't know that this happened. And legend has it that they walked in there and they had been drinking that day when they did this. So yeah, fast forward to 7th grade year, not knowing where to go or what to do, but you just walked into the gym and some friends grabbed you and said, hey, you got to go to the gym. And I walked over to the D line, and I had a couple of friends come over and say, hey, Thunder, you're over, because my nickname was Thunder, just like my uncle's. Hey, you're down there. The T's are down there. And I said, no, I'm in the right line. No, you're not. You're in the D line. And I said, hey, dudes, beat it. I'm in the right line. And I had to go up there, and then rumor goes around pretty quick that Timmy Thundercloud is now Tim Decorah. And I had to live with that anxiety and what came with that for, I don't remember how long, but it didn't sit well, and I was ashamed. I was embarrassed, and
wow,
crazy.
I don't think I even knew that. This is where the subscribers, followers, and listeners take out the notebooks, pens, and pencils and jot some things down. Here are Coach Decorah's 5 suggestions that have allowed him to survive and thrive in anxiety and substance use disorder. Here's what you shared with me. I'm going to throw them to you, as you say, softball style. Can you hit a softball? I've seen you play men's league before.
I can hit a softball.
Still?
Give me a DeMarini bat, and I can hit a softball.
All right, we'll start with number 1. Faith. Go ahead and hit that.
Faith. One of the things that my mom taught me, and I used it a lot on those scary nights when I was at home with my great-grandmother or by myself, and she would leave and go do what 20 and 22-year-olds do. I'd be at home by myself, and she taught me how to pray. And I've used that all along. And I think it's believing in something that can help you in the worst case scenario, or to help somebody else out. So yeah, I pray a lot, and I have a higher power, and my higher power is God, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit, or the Great Spirit. And I just believe that I have to have somebody helping me in my corner all the time. And because of my belief and my faith, my deep faith, I'm pretty confident that I can usually get through things, but it really helped me when I was young.
Number 2, practice APF. Go ahead and hit that.
APF is acceptance, patience, and forgiveness. And because I didn't have any coping skills since 2021, I learned APF. And APF is a concept that I didn't necessarily come up with, but it gets put in because it's abbreviated in my journal every day. The A is accepting. I accept things and how they happen, and there's really not much you can do about them, so I just have to accept how things are. And I would battle against that my whole life, that I can't accept it. There's got to be a reason why or how come. Patience. I like to practice patience, and just patience allows me to take a deep breath and relax before I make some kind of decision or choice. And oftentimes before I had any patience, I would just be reactive and react without thinking. So having some patience helps me to breathe and relax. And then certainly forgiveness, and I've already talked about it on that March 2022 time frame, where I forgave my mom for what I thought was her being a bad parent, when actually it was the other way around. I forgave her for being a parent that tried the best she could with the limited skills that she was taught. And she just tried the best she could, and I forgave her for that, and it really took a weight off my shoulder. So APF, acceptance, patience, and forgiveness.
I like that. Number 3, take time for yourself. Go ahead and hit that. Prior to 2021, I was only concerned about making other people happy, doing other things for people, and trying to make other people get through life as easy as they can. And the one person I wasn't making happy or making sure they had an easy life was me. And when I started putting myself first, my mental health, my physical health, my spiritual health, my emotional health, things got easier for me. And consequently, then I could start to help other people with their stuff that they had going on. So when I put myself first, I made myself happy. It's kind of like that airplane thing. If we lose cabin pressure, put your mask on first before you put somebody else's on. That was kind of me. I was putting somebody else's mask on for my whole life. Now I'm putting the mask on myself, and I can help others. So I take time for myself. And as you know, I've been going on a lot of trips by myself, and that's just part of who I am now, and it's part of my healing. Mm-hmm. Number 4, you referenced it already, journaling. Go ahead and hit that.
Journaling. I've been journaling probably on and off since 2014, but probably in the last 3 or 4 years, I journal every day. In the morning, it's one of the first things I do when I get up, and I journal at night, and it's one of the last things I do. And I talk about my goals. I talk about how I feel, and then I also talk about what I'm grateful for. And those keep me on track for the day. They also remind me about what is important in my life, the gratitude stuff. And then I revisit those things at night. And if I'm not feeling so good, I've heard this thing that don't go to bed angry. Don't go to bed in an argument with your significant other. So I try not to do that, and I go to bed feeling good and ready for the next day. And then the goals part, I can check off the goals, and did I accomplish those things? And I make them relatively easy because I like to win. And so setting goals is like setting myself up for wins, and I make them relatively easy so I can check them off at the end of the day. So I think journaling is important. And then the last thing about journaling is that if something went wrong, I can look back 2 or 3 months ago or a year ago and what did I do? And the same thing happened. Well, what did I do back then? And I can go and review what worked and how I got out of it so that I can use those same skills on when bad things happen. I can refer to my journal.
I love journaling. I need to do it more myself. And last but not least, number 5, family. Go ahead and hit that last one.
Yeah, I learned this from my extended family, really both sides, the Decorah side and the Thundercloud side, probably more from the Thundercloud, but that family is important and you take care of your family. And that was never more evident than when my dad was absent growing up, that my grandpa and great uncle stepped in, and then my other uncle stepped in. And 2 of those guys, Gary and Byron Thundercloud, were more like older brothers to me. And then when I had to move into town with my aunt and Uncle Sam and Aunt Rose, they took me in without batting an eye. They took me in and essentially kind of raised me. And then, since then, a lot of those same aunts and uncles have come to watch you guys play and participate in your lives as much as they can. So family has been, very important to me. And now my family has included not just you and Emily and Sam, but now includes Rory and Annie and little Sissy. So it's extended now, and my family is growing as well. So family is very important.
What a first episode. I'm so glad you could join the Survive and Thrive 8791 crew today. Your approach to life and how you managed to get through most of your life with an anxiety disorder is inspiring. You are doing some amazing work since your diagnosis and bringing awareness to mental health disorders. Our call to action. Dad just shared his story and how he has been working through an anxiety and alcohol use disorder. He wanted to share his story and bring awareness to his diagnosis and help those who can't help themselves. Here are my dad or Coach Decorah's 5 suggestions to survive and thrive. Number 1, faith. Believe in a higher power. Number 2, practice APF, acceptance, patience, and forgiveness. Number 3, take time for yourself. Number 4, journaling. And number 5, family. So that will conclude our first episode. In the next episode, make sure you tune in to continue down this path and the journey that my dad's life has put him on. We're going to talk about his college years, becoming a parent at a young age, and starting his professional career. So be sure you don't miss it, and remember to like and subscribe. Final thoughts. As we close out another great episode of Survive and Thrive 8791, are there any final thoughts that you have, Dad?
Well, as it turns out, this episode has turned out much better than I thought. And some of the questions you asked got me to talk about some things that maybe I didn't realize were there before, and now we're getting them out. I think this is going to be really good in the fact that you're asking some questions that draw a few more things out, and this will also give us a digital footprint of, who I am, some of the things I haven't shared with you and the rest of the family will start to come out, and then the grandkids and everybody else coming along they're going to be able to know what my grandpa was all about or what my great grandpa was all about. They're going to know about that. And I think that's really cool. As far as my other final thoughts too, is I just, I mentioned this to somebody, can't remember, a couple of days ago, that I think I need to thank your mom, my wife, Sarah, and then you and Emily, and certainly Sam, have got me through some of those tough times. And it was that unconditional love that you showed, that when I was struggling, I think you may have noticed it. You and Mom and Emily and Sam tried to do as good a job as you could, sensing that there was something wrong with Dad. And we want to try to help him, but we don't know how. He's just got to help himself. So, I wanted to thank you guys and get that somewhere. in the digital footprint that you guys did the best you could with what you knew and what you had. And it definitely helped. So if you ever thought that you didn't do enough, I think you did do enough. And we're all here to be able to record this podcast because of that. So thank you and your brother and your sister and your mom and the rest of the Thundercloud and the Decorah families and students and teachers and friends and colleagues. I was raised by a community in the Dells, and I think I'm got that kind of same help through some of the tough times I needed to go through. So thanks for giving me that awareness.
Of course. Yeah, I think what you talked about in not having a choice with raising Troy and being there, and that's just what you did. That's how at least I felt. I'm sure Emily and Sam and Mom and everybody else can speak in a similar sense, but it's just what we did. And it wasn't because it was right or wrong or good or bad. It was because you're our dad and husband, and we loved you, and we still do love you. And again, all things and all roads have led me to this point, and it's a pretty good life.
Been pretty good so far.
Been pretty good so far. So I'm thankful for it, but thank you for saying that. On our next episode of Survive and Thrive 8791, we'll continue down my dad's life journey, moving into his college years, becoming a parent at a young age, and starting his career. We will find out more how he dealt with an anxiety disorder, an alcohol use disorder, and what he did to overcome those things to survive and thrive. If you have a story to share or you know somebody who does, please reach out to my dad at tdecorah, that's TDECORAH @gmail.com. Until next time, hang in there with whatever you happen to be going through. And with hard work, dedication, and determination, you can survive and thrive. Until next time, take care.